So we have two design partners here from Google Ventures, good friend Daniel Burka and Jake Knapp. They're kind of rolling up like Eminem style up in the club up in here. So these guys are great. They're going to talk about the design sprint process at Google Ventures, which if you haven't read too much about it, it's really neat. It's kind of invented by Jake, and he did it at Google for a while, and then Ventures said, well, how about you help us do it over here? And it's really great. So give a huge, warm, hearty, loving welcome to these two fine gentlemen. Woohoo!
Thanks, you guys. Thank you for that lovely introduction, Mark.
You are welcome.
Although I did notice you said Daniel is your friend, and you did not say whether I was your friend.
For the record, we just became Twitter friends.
Okay.
And I'm also only about 6 feet if I'm wearing boots, but
It's okay.
I'm good.
So I want to start off actually on a little bit of a different topic that has nothing to do with design directly. Actually, you guys, raise your hands if you remember when Nintendo looked like this. Anybody? No? Oh, okay, good. It's great. Okay, so I'm really glad to see that I'm not the only person who's old. So back in 1986, this is a story about my wife, actually, who was 9 years old in 1986, as was I, although I didn't know her at the time. And this is what the Nintendo looked like. And if you were 9 years old in 1986, or any age around there, you wanted a Nintendo more than anything. It was a phenomenally exciting device. The catch was it cost $199. And if you're 9 years old, even now, $199 is a lot. But in the 80s, I mean, my God. And, you know, okay, so the clicker thing's doing, okay. So, so my wife arranged to, and now you know how much she paid, she arranged to rent a Nintendo for a weekend because she had saved up. She's very industrious, and she had saved up, like, you know, doing chores around the neighborhood and saving her allowance, and she had the $200, and then she kind of like got cold feet. And so she decides, I'm going to rent the Nintendo from my neighbor for $4, and she'll have it all weekend. So all day Saturday, all day Sunday, Nintendo, all the games, she can play as much as she wants. And I think that what my wife imagined was probably something like this. So this is promotional material from Nintendo from that era, and if you look closely at this, oh man, this is just killing the vibe here. If you look closely at this family, you will see that they are incredibly excited about Nintendo. I mean, there's an intensity about them that, and in fact, if you look closely, I don't know if you guys remember Super Mario Brothers, but these brothers don't even seem to notice that it's just a one-player game. But that was the way it was. This is the way it was. Nintendo was so exciting. And this is what she imagined, like her family kind of gathered around, and the reality was more like this. And this is not an actual photo of my wife, but it's kind of, yeah, something I found online, and I imagine it's what her experience was kind of like. You know, it's like nose pressed to the screen up till 3, 4 a.m., eyes bloodshot, and by the end of the day, on Sunday, she gave the Nintendo back, and she was like, I cannot handle owning a Nintendo. And so she saved herself a lot of money and trouble. And this idea of renting before you buy is actually, we think, quite applicable to software development and prototyping, and that's what we're going to talk about today.
So I've lived in the Bay Area for a while and worked with quite a few startups, and some of the best product teams in the Bay Area go by like a ship early, ship often, or a move fast and break things mentality. And the way this usually goes is that you come up with a hypothesis, then you build it as quickly as you can. You determine what is an MVP that we can get to. You go through the effort of launching it, getting out in front of your users, and then you try to measure the results. But frequently, this is actually not how it actually goes down. In reality, what happens is you often start with a bad idea. A hypothesis, by definition, is something you're unsure of, and the whole point of launching and testing is to see if your idea is good. Often it's a bad idea. Then you spend a bunch of time actually engineering that idea, and if it was a bad idea, you're wasting your time. Even if it's a good idea, this almost invariably takes much longer than you think it will. Then now that you've invested the time in engineering the thing, you feel a lot of pressure to actually launch it, and so you go through the effort of pushing your code live, which again is more work usually than you think it will be. Now you've got it out in the wild, and as Scott was saying, the results are usually more inconclusive than you'd like to think. You don't get that clear data that this was good or not. And now your product's out in the wild. And if it wasn't a great idea, even if it was a terrible idea, there's always a handful of users who fucking love the thing. And they're going to be pissed if you roll it back and take it away. And so now that's out in the wild. And then what you're supposed to do is go around and iterate over and over again on an idea. But usually you actually just move on to the next shiny idea and pursue that instead. So something we're doing a lot with our portfolio companies, and we've done now with over 75 different companies across a broad range of industries, is a prototyping process. And over the course of 5 days, we go from coming up with an idea, speccing it out, prototyping it, and then measuring the results. And in only 5 days, you can learn a lot about what works and what doesn't work. And we call this a 5-day design sprint.
So I want to give you a story about what one of these looks like. I'm going to tell you about a project we did with Blue Bottle Coffee. If you guys aren't familiar with Blue Bottle, they're a coffee shop, but they're an investment that Google Ventures made, and quite successful, number of locations around San Francisco and New York City. If you haven't been, they've got a store in the Ferry Building. Inside the Ferry Building, any of you from out of town, there's a bunch of shops kind of aimed at commuters and tourists, and there's this one shop in particular that always has a really long line, and it's not the store that sells only mushrooms. It's okay. All right, a couple of people didn't know the store that sells only mushrooms. Okay, so there's this really long line, and if you look closely at this line, you may recognize a familiar sort of praying mantis style figure. That is, in fact, me. Apparently,
he only has one shirt.
Yeah. This is my good shirt. Yeah. Really need some new slides. Or new shirt. So the coffee's fantastic, and if you've had it, you guys know it's really great. A beautiful in-store experience. They've got this lovely interior design, these wonderful, friendly, knowledgeable baristas, and it's great. But they were not happy with their website. So they have this website. You can go on there, buy beans. They'll ship the beans freshly roasted to your house, almost still warm. And the conversion just wasn't what they were looking for. So we'd made this investment. They said, you guys do a sprint with us. And so we had do just 5 days. And one of the reasons why people want to ship early is to create a deadline. Because I'm a procrastinator. I'm guessing like maybe 1 or 2 of you in the audience may be natural procrastinators as well. And we really like to be able to have a ship date, because it's like, we've got to get it done by the ship date, right? We want to try to simulate that, and our trick is, if we're doing a 5-day sprint on Monday, the first thing we'll do is schedule people to come in on Friday. So we get 5 users, and they're going to come in, and then once that's scheduled, we haven't even started yet, but we're like, oh my god, it'll be super embarrassing if we don't have anything, so better get our act together. The other key in the beginning is getting the right people in the room, and in most companies there are more right people than you usually think. It's obvious to have the product people, the folks who are going to be making the product. You want the designer, engineer, product people. But there's a lot of other people who know a lot about the business and may have surprising insights about how to make the product work well. So in this case, we want the founder in there, the CFO, people who are on the ground, like customer support and marketing, and really understand the experience in the store. And getting all those people together in the same room has a pretty important impact. And it's really important for us because we're trying to figure out how to sell coffee beans online. I'm like, I don't know how to do that. So one thing we did, which is kind of obvious, is we looked at other coffee shops that were doing this and doing it successfully. And we noticed this pattern. You guys have probably seen this before. If you can see, it says Latin America, Africa. The coffee beans are arranged by region. Here it is again, Africa and the Americas again. You see this everywhere. And in fact, it's not just like boutique high-end coffees. This is a menu from Starbucks, and you can see it says Guatemalan, Colombian, Ethiopian coffee. And I'd like a quick show of hands if you know the difference between Guatemalan and Colombian coffee. Raise your hand. Okay, there's a few of you who know, and the rest of you, you should not feel bad because neither Daniel or I know. And
heck, we had a guy who came in and did the user study with us in the end, and he admitted that he roasts his own beans at home. So he's buying raw beans and actually roasting them. And we showed him one of these interfaces, and he goes, okay, it's kind of embarrassing, but I should know the difference between these, but honestly, depends how you roast it a lot, and I always feel really embarrassed when he gets in front of the cafe and he doesn't know.
We're like, dude, you roast your own beans, you don't know, nobody knows. And so we said to James, because James really wanted to bring the cafe experience to the website, we said, James, how do you guys handle this in the cafe? People come in, and he says, well, yeah, we train the baristas that if somebody comes in and they want to buy beans and they're not sure what to do, this is a real barista, not me wearing a hat. We'd say, oh boy, that's a lot of slides. Okay, we asked them, how do you make coffee at home? And it turns out that whether somebody makes coffee in a Chemex or French press or drip machine really depends on like which coffee you're going to suggest. And I remember that when James said that, like, how do you make coffee at home? We asked him that. I looked over at Daniel, and Daniel's eyes got big, and it was as if this beam of inspiration had come in from the window. Like,
it was just like this.
It was
exactly
just,
like
it was
this.
just like, this is a photograph. So the cool thing is, like, you get all these people like in the same room, and we learned something that like we never would have figured out if we'd had just the product people.
So now we've spent the first day kind of laying down the foundation, understanding which challenges we're actually going to try to pursue, and then what is the foundational knowledge that might help us actually come up with solutions. And the next thing we do is we spend a bunch of time drawing. And so we actually are starting to write things down on pieces of paper. Be clear here, though, this is not group brainstorming. We actually intentionally avoid brainstorming. Brainstorming results in groupthink, and it also results in people just skimming over ideas and coming up with things that are really not thought through very well. Instead, we get everybody in the entire group to spend their time alone, on their own, sketching down little interfaces. So they've got a piece of paper, and they're sketching a possible solution in an actual interface with real words on it. And everyone from the founder to the investor to including the designers, who can obviously draw a little more convincingly than the other people, we all are sketching down little interfaces until we've got a whole bunch of solutions.
Yeah, we'll end up with 10, 12, 14 different designs that are all, somebody spent 2 hours on, and there's a lot of detail. And that's great, but now we have a problem. We've got to narrow it down, figure out which ones we're going to prototype for Friday. So one of our ideas is that voting is better than talking. And I'm sure some of you in this room have also experienced something I've experienced, which is like a marathon meeting where you're talking and talking and trying to sort of like philosophically hash out which is the best design. Maybe not. That might be only me. But I really find that this is not very efficient and really not a good way to come up with anything other than a compromise. So our approach is this thing we call weighted voting. And the idea is we start off and everyone gets as many of these like little blue dots as they want, and they basically put the dots on the drawings where they think there's a good idea. And you get this sort of heat map of what the group thinks. So that's a group think, but it's interesting. It's very interesting to see that. Then we switch gears and we find out who makes design decisions in the company. In this case, it's James. James gets a limited number of big red dots, and he puts those on the ones that he really wants us to prototype. Sometimes these end up being a little bit riskier or more opinionated, and that's really good. That's kind of what we want. We don't want a decision in the room that doesn't carry forward after the sprint is over. So he picks 3 of our designs. The first idea is to take the interior design of the cafe and try to translate that to the web, so shelves, things of that nature. Second idea is to tell the story of Blue Bottle. So the notion here is like there's a lot of knowledge and expertise. We want to show that with a lot of text. And finally, using that idea of like sorting the coffee beans by how you brew coffee at home. So we've got these 3 ideas. We've got to decide which one are we actually going to prototype and test. And I don't know which one's best. We don't know which one is the best. So we decided we're going to prototype all 3. We do a battle royale and actually like build all 3. But the trouble is, it's already Thursday morning. We only have 1 day, and we've got to build 3 prototypes. So
this might seem a little bit crazy. We've spent 3 days coming up with the foundational knowledge, sketching down some ideas, and then deciding which ones we want to pursue. But we actually have a few tricks up our sleeve to move really quickly. So in a single day, we're going to have users coming in on Friday morning at 9 a.m. We're able to prototype in fairly high fidelity some concepts. What we do is we take a bunch of those little sketches that we've done previously, and we lay them out in a storyboard format. So we actually are guiding users through a fairly complex process, a very realistic process of what the store might be like. But when you look at those sketches, you actually realize that there's a lot of detail in there. We don't let people scrimp on copywriting, which is one of the more oft overlooked elements of design. You actually have to write real copy. You put down potential places where the buttons might go, where graphics might go. And so when I look to this to make a prototype, I can actually lift elements of these off the page and lay them down in a prototype quite quickly. Another trick we do is we use Keynote very frequently for the MOGs. Not only does this let us bring it up on a computer in a really realistic looking format, but it allows us to work in what I call like the Goldilocks level of detail. You're not working in extreme abstraction, so we don't do paper prototyping and we're not showing users wireframes, But at the same time, we're not wasting our time designing perfect buttons and making sure our typography is like exactly precise. That can come later. Instead, we're moving as quickly as we can in Keynote, and we're using tools like Keynotopia, where we have a bunch of default form elements, and we can just drag them onto our mockups. This lets us, in a single day, string together usually 10 or 12 screens in a flow that seems really realistic. And now we've got mocks for the examples that Jake was just saying. We've got this telescope coffee. We even create a fake brand, so anybody who might have been familiar with Blue Bottle isn't biased towards one of the designs. This is the one about storytelling. We've got another one that is like the in-store experience. And this one, which is showing how you might be able to choose coffees.
So now it's time for the rubber to hit the road. We're going to find out what happens with our research. But I think there's a reason why a lot of small companies tend to be nervous about doing user research. One of the big ones is that it sounds really complicated. Like you've got, got to have like a behavioral psychologist to conduct the interviews, and we need like a room with a one-way mirror, like maybe an eye tracker or something. And you really do not need a super fancy setup. So what we tend to do is run Keynote full screen on a laptop. Laptop's got a webcam, and we'll have one person conduct the interview, and we've got these people who we recruited on Craigslist and sort of filtered down using survey to find out if they were good customer matches. They go through each of the prototypes, and we're watching in another room using GoToMeeting or Apple TV to project. And you do this 5 times, and we get really pretty good data without having to go through a launch. It's quite deep. We know why things work or don't work. So we've got our battle royale, and here's the results. Find out that this notion of recreating the cafe does not work at all. And this is my design, so it's a little painful to see it shredded in the studies, but it's just quite good overall, because if you think about that cycle of like building and shipping and all the time and money that takes, it's quite nice to find that out in just a few hours. Storytelling turns out to work quite well. It turns out that a lot of text gives people more confidence in the competency of this made-up coffee company, and this idea of how do you brew also turns out to work. So what we end up with is a website that looks like this. So this is the design kind of post-sprint. And you'll see front and center, there's how do you brew your coffee. And you can also see that there's like a lot of text in here. In fact, when you look on this page, you'll see like so much text that you think, that's terrible. Like, no one reads on the web. But whether they read it or not, telling that story conveys a lot of confidence. So now that Blue Bottle's got like some confidence from going around this loop once quickly, they are not going to do everything in a sprint format. And that's not our aim. We want to build confidence so that it makes sense now to go around the horn and build it, launch it, go to all that trouble, and get real metrics, because real metrics matter too. So Blue Bottle's launch, it's been out a couple of weeks, or a couple of months, sorry, and they've doubled their sales growth and doubled their time spent on site, which is great. But this is just a website.
So you might be kind of skeptical after hearing this, that's it's an e-commerce site. That's not rocket science necessarily. And we've done this now with over 75 different startups. And they're across a huge range of industries. So we've done mobile testing. So we've worked with Pocket. We've worked with Fitstar. We've even worked with expert users across a wide range of fields. We've worked with investors. We've worked with can never tell when this is going to work. We've worked with woodworkers, geneticists, with farmers. We've even worked with doctors. So this is a project we did with a bunch of oncologists. And we've even done it with startup founders. So we actually were just recently redesigning our own website, gv.com. And we did 2 sprints early in the process to learn what's really important to founders when they come to a VC website that they're unfamiliar with. And the learnings that we got from those sprints were incredibly valuable for us to go confidently towards the finish line. And we launched the site on Wednesday, and the result has been predictably positive.
So we feel pretty good about this, and we've been kind of surprised with how well a Keynote prototype can work with any kind of user, from a consumer who you can easily recruit to someone who's a deep expert in some niche category. There's sort of 3 keys to making this 5-day sprint work. And first one is this deadline that we can't get out of once we set it. Makes you a lot more motivated. The second is prototyping. So basically doing just enough to fake the experience, but not build the entire thing. And finally, doing research with people who are outside the building makes a big difference. We see this a lot in the Valley. We hear this a lot. And we kind of want to edit this statement a little bit. So I think what everybody really wants to do is to learn early and learn often. And when you take the word ship out of there, it kind of opens you up to the opportunity to build a lot of confidence before you make that expensive commitment to ship. Because no matter how fast you ship, it's costly. Anything you can do to rent before you buy early on will help you out.
So we haven't had a chance to talk in immense detail about each of the steps that go on in this sprint, but we've written extensively about it on our blog, and on we have a new GV library. So either follow this link or go to gv.com, and you can learn how you can use this in your own organization. Thank you so much for having us, and good luck prototyping.